Let's get into it. 1, 2, 3. Let's get some more. Have your hands. Get some more. Just get some more.
Why, hello, and welcome to My Whiskey Den, your favorite public access whiskey review show where craft whiskey is king. This evening, though, we're switching over to Brandy and some other tasty samples we have here this evening because we have Lynn and Martin from Edelbrand on. Thank you so very, very much for being with us this evening.
I'm happy to be here.
And before we go a second further, Mike, I'm going to give the controls over to you so I don't flip things on and off like we often fight over.
Okay. All right. We'll do it. We'll do our fun part. Okay. We are proud members of the Bar Cart Co-op, which is a collection of friends, great content for the whiskey and other distilled spirits public. And some of the shows that are involved with that are Distillers Talk, which is actually where I got first acquainted with Edelbrand Pure Distilling. Distillers Talk is the oldest one. It comes out towards the end of the week, and it is a very deep dive with distillers and distillery adjacent folks. Very much worth your time, even if you are not in the industry. You learn a lot about grains, equipment, process directly from people. Also, along with that, we have the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, which is another one of Alan's shows, and that's where he answers your questions and put things to the test, from equipment to grains to processes. And One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute comes out whenever he feels like it, and it's very often. He answers questions from all over the world, and again, he will put things to the test, so subscribe to it, and you will get a lot of information your way. We also have Bourbon Turntable, which comes to you every Wednesday through all the normal means and YouTube. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, and that is the love of whiskey with the love of music. And they have a lot of fantastic interviews with not just distillery people, not just musicians, but both, and people who are on the periphery of that. So tune into that on every Wednesday. They've got a live show or two coming up pretty soon, so make sure you subscribe to those. They're very entertaining. Also, we have another one of Alan's shows. If you have ghosts, you have everything, and that is I don't want to call it a paranormal podcast, and I don't think that Alan calls that either. But because there are so many things with the spirits and spirits involved, that not just drinking, but the spirits around us. And there's lots of stories from distilleries and other old places like that. And I think that's where a lot of that started. So it's very interesting. That one comes out on just Spotify. Subscribe it. They just wrapped up their second season on that. So, but yeah, I think that's all the ads. Unless they add more shows, which actually Alan's going to add more shows. He's going to do his own network. Well, he's going to do something I think that's kind of between Distillers Talk and One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. So that would be, I don't know how you get between long form conversation, and I'm going to answer all your questions. But he's doing something there. That's all I know.
Well, like we were saying beforehand, we are really, really excited to have you guys here. It was a fantastic tasting set that you guys sent, along with glasses, which I know you believe matter with what's going on, and just by the shape of them, you can tell how things are going to get funneled up a little bit tighter than most people's standard glass. So I've already been nosing some of the pair we decided we were going to start with, and it just cracking the bottle when I did it the first time, you got a rush of flavor coming out of that from a distance. I was going to say before I even poured it, there was pear that was starting to come out from just cracking the bottle. So really excited to get into that. But I wanted to kind of spin things back in time. How did you guys get involved in the distilling industry? How did that happen?
Well, it started about probably 13, 14 years ago. And I was working for a machine building company, and my boss actually called me up on a Saturday. I was in there on a Saturday. We were busy and behind as usual. So I was in there, and he called me up and said, "Hey, I got something for you. Come, why don't you come in my office quickly?" So I went into his office, and there he had in a big garbage bag, actually covered, wrapped up. He had a 7-gallon copper pot still. And he said, "I just got this from, the guy that we work with, in the metal, fab industry, and he just gave me this still, and I really, I don't want to play. I don't have time with it. Do you want to play with it?" And I figured that's a pretty good idea. Let's take it home. Start exactly that, and that's really how it got started. That was the kickoff. And, I started reading a lot of books. I, talked to a lot of people at home from Switzerland. And there's history over in Europe on these fruit brandies is hundreds of years. And everybody over there has fruit trees. And if they have fruit trees, they make mash. And they bring it to the village distiller, and he distills it for them. And so I kind of grew up. My grandpa did it. My sister and her husband, do it, every year. And I just kind of grew up, in this environment. And, this little still kind of kicked it off. And I thought, well, let's go and play with it and try it. And I got really totally interested in the process of it and enjoyed it. And just with books and talking to distillers and, learning from, over in Switzerland, that's kind of where we got today.
Oh, there's a little bit more in between.
But were there any family recipes though that you've come to find out now that you're what it's like once people find out you're distilling, or is there any recipes that someone brings up, says, "Oh, well, here's, your great grandfather used to make this," or?
Well, the recipe that we brought over from the area where, my sister still lives, and it's kind of our place of origin in Switzerland. I brought that recipe we did was the apples, and we get into that when we taste the apples.
Okay.
So the pear you're
All right.
tasting right now is a beautiful Bartlett pear. This here it is. We use the Bartlett pear. Over in Europe, this would be a Williams pear or a Poire Williams. They're the exact same pear, but Bartlett brought it across the ocean, so he wanted credit for the cuttings. But the pear itself is the gold standard of eau de vie, and I think really the reason is that it's just so recognizable when it's done well.
Yes.
You not only get the lusciousness of a beautiful ripe Bartlett pear, but you also get on the nose and even that first sip. You get, if you think about the ripest Bartlett pear that you could possibly imagine, as you bite it, you're getting a bit of bitterness as you pierce the skin of the fruit. And then your teeth sink into the honeyness that we all know a Bartlett can deliver. And the way that we go into these fruit brandies is different than a traditional brandy. Traditional brandies are typically made from just the juice of fruit, and they are fermented for a fairly short period of time. The juice is fermented for 7 to 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. It's double distilled, and then it is put in a barrel. And it makes beautiful brandies. There's nothing wrong with an aged spirit, as we all know. But with European brandy makers like Martin and that are making eau de vie or these unaged brandies, they really want the focus to be on what the fruit can do by itself instead of what air barrel aging does to the spirit. And so we start out with whole fruit mashes. And these whole fruit mashes, we're looking for extremely ripe fruit so that we can get everything the fruit can deliver. And we use very long fermentation times. So the pear that you're tasting here sat in a fermentation tank anywhere from, what was it, this particular batch?
It's a half a year. Actually, I wrote it down so you guys, could kind of hear how we made it. I mean, this was in this mash barrel for 175 days.
Wow.
Now, the fermentation didn't last that long, obviously, and we'll talk about that. Just to give people kind of a skeleton, it fermented it set in a fermentation tank with the yeast, and that's all we add. We don't add water, we don't add essences or oils, we sure don't add sugar. So we're depending on extremely ripe fruit. We let it sit and basically soak after the fermentation is done, soak against those skins and all that fruit flesh. And we keep it in a very comfortable environment. And then we double distill it. And once it's distilled, we just let it sit and rest. And that's how you get these beautiful nuanced nose and aromatics. And then, of course, you get what is going across the palate. And Martin can talk about what happens in the fermentation, because it's lovely. And that's how you get this kind of a spirit.
Yeah, I think the reason why we do it that long is after 2-3 weeks, the fermentation is complete, is done, the yeast is dying off. But at the same time, the mash liquefied quite a bit during the fermentation process. And that's what we're using, to really soak those skins in that liquid for so long. And the tanks, I do an open fermentation for like 3-4 days until the yeast multiplied properly. And then I turn it under. And when I do that, I might give it another day. And then I basically close it up, seal it off, put a vapor lock on, and that's it. And I never open it up until I get ready to distill it, which is, this one here, just after a half a year. And it's really pulls out all these flavors and aromas. The skins of the fruits probably have as much flavor and aromas, than the flesh itself. And people don't really realize that too much. But like Lynn said, if you bite into a ripe pear, there's a little bit of a bitterness that comes from the skin. If you bite into a plum, there is a little bit of a spiciness of the skin, with the plum. And these nuances and these aromas, it's just amazing how they come out over time when they're sealed off, like that. And they just soak, in this really probably halfway liquefied, mash in these tanks. And then we take these tanks and put them right into the little pot stills. I mean, first they go into the stripping still, which is a 40-gallon pot still. And after that, they go into those little stills that you see in the background here from us. There is the one on the very left is a 12-gallon, and the others are 3 18-gallon. And the little guy in the back is the 7-gallon still that I started out with. Awesome. So we use these stills and for the second run, for the spirit run, and we run them extremely slow. Like these 18-gallon stills, they might be filled with maybe 12 gallons, 14 gallons of spirit, and they heat up in about a couple hours. They don't have a mixer on it, so it needs to be heated up very slowly. They're in a water bath, and it takes about 2 hours to heat them up. But then a spirit run in those 18-gallon stills is typically 10 hours just to run after it's heated up. And I don't run tails. So I don't run tails. I don't collect them. I don't have a use for them, so I don't reintroduce tails into my next runs. I don't do that. If it's not good and you have to take it off and you have to separate it, then why putting it back in, So it's just a little bit of alcohol you might get, or save, but that's not worth it to me. So
Tell us what you're tasting in that pear. What's coming through for you?
I was just going to get to that was when you mentioned your first description was very spot on. It was just almost disturbing. I started pointing fingers as you were doing it, but I wanted to shut up and let you talk. But just the right pear and getting that little, and the flavor of the rind kind of sits on top of my tongue afterwards, while the outsides are like have a little bit more of that ripened juice kind of taste to it. It has this really neat full like envelopment of the flavor at that point. It's a really neat one, I think. Sorry, I'll let you guys talk, but I just thought that I was surprised how much the rind flavor kind of came through in it, you know, and it was really neat.
That subtleness is really important. And that's one of the things that we try to preserve. And you get a different spirit with barrel aging. It's not that it's a better spirit or a worse spirit. It's a different spirit. And we encourage people when we're introducing unaged spirits to somebody who's never had one to just say, you know, just look for something different, because it's going to be very different than an aged spirit. Mike, I know you've tasted this before, and I've had the pleasure of tasting them with you.
Yeah, I was curious. I'm curious what Mitch, before I say something, because my notes are a little different.
So this is wild because I don't eat a lot of pears, and when I do, I don't do Bartlett pears. I do like the super sweet pears because I have the trashiest American palate possible if you just love sugar. So this is like really a new experience for me. It's warm, like it's very hard to kind of express that. Like this, I guess the kind of skin and pith flavor is just, it's not quite baking spices, but it's just this kind of warmth that it's not cobbler, if that makes sense, but it tastes almost like the pears have just started to break down, and that sugarless warmth that is just really coating my mouth. I am sorry, it's terrible tasting note there, but this is very new to me. So
I think that's good, because what it reminds me of, because the other times I had the pear was when Lynn was doing tasting, but it, you know, you can taste, obviously it's pear, and you know, but on the nose it reminds me of the big and I don't know why I never can remember the name of this place, the place that sells the massive fruit at holiday time, and they have those enormous pears, and it reminds me of those on the nose. But what it really tastes like is my oldest likes to make little like personal gourmet pizzas, and one of the things that she'll do is she'll make a pizza that it's cauliflower cracker crust, so you know it's pretty thin and basic, but then it is drizzled with a very small amount of honey, pear slices, and a little bit of nut. And then with that it's being warm right out of the oven, and you'll taste it and you get the sweetness, and then you're like, oh, there's the pear. And she leaves the skin on the pears when she puts it in too. So it 100% reminds me of that. It's kind of like her little dessert gourmet pizza with the nut and the honey and the pear. It's delicious. I do really like this a lot.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is our number one seller, not only to the consumer and the general public, but also to bars and restaurants. It's traditionally these are served as digestives after dinner, but you put it in the hands of Americans, and we have to play.
Yeah. Well, so that's a question I guess we can answer it as we go through each one of these, because I know last time you were in town, you were taking some spirits to bars. And I'm curious what they're doing with it, because I have the and I'll mispronounce it, and I do apologize. The Vinars de Gavosa, is that correct?
Apricosas.
Okay.
Yeah. You have the apricot?
No. The one that was the distilled
beer,
the wit beer. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the Vinars de Gavosa. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Okay.
You. Yes.
Yeah. And so I took that because I kept thinking, wow, this would be really great to slip someone in and to make them think it's a gin. Well, I did actually do it and was making versions of a gin and tonic with that for Easter. And it went very well, just so you know.
Well, The fruit brandies pair, first of all, just a simple aperitif is splashed over Prosecco or Cava, 1 to 2 teaspoons splashed over Prosecco. It just makes it effervescent. It's a very simple one to do. We recommend a Prosecco or a Cava because they're lightly sweet. Moscato is way too sweet. Once you coat your tongue with something like that, it's hard to recover these spirits up pretty quickly. So we don't recommend pairing these with anything super syrupy. And champagne is too dry. These are dry spirits. So that's an easy one. But generally, these pair very well with gins and vermouths. They're also, if you want a lower ABV, you can do pair these with seltzers. They're lovely with that and simple syrups. So we don't have a bartending background. We're learning ourselves, but there's some really cool recipes on our website, and we're getting ready to work with bartenders to come up with a bit of a recipe book for cocktails. So do you want to move to our apple? Would you like to move on?
Yeah.
Yes, apple sounds great.
I have a quick question right before we move on. Do you pull the seeds out of the pears before you? No. Okay, so you do you pull the stems off or anything, or is it just?
We do on all the fruits we de-stem, we wash them, we de-stem, and like on the pears and apples, we just crush them with the seeds. So the seeds are in, the skins are in, but we do handle every fruit, every pear, every apple, and if there is rotten areas in it, we cut them out. I mean, it's for a good, for a high quality spirit, you gotta do a high quality mash, because without that, you're not going to get a high quality spirit. So everything gets pulled out that is rotten or is not fit to go into the mash tank. So.
And that's down to the cherry as well.
Okay. So slight follow-up question. Do you ever get concerned about like cracking the seeds open, or if you do like stone fruits, cracking kind of that big pit open, or is that kind of what's bringing some of that like warmth and taste to the flavor?
We really don't worry about it.
Okay.
We really don't worry about it. And yes, there is, some cracked, seeds in there, you can't avoid it, but we try to, cut them. We kind of quarter them, and we try to cut them, around the core, and then everything just gets kind of mashed in, So I think most of the seeds are staying intact, but you can't avoid it, and I'm not really worried about it, because when when you distill it, I think the arsenic compound is so low, and it evaporates, it actually with the heads, so it's.
And for the pitted fruits, we have a pitter. For the first time last year, we finally got a pitter. So after 6 years of hand pitting all the stone fruits, and I've said this before,
I'm so sorry.
Last year we processed 12,000 pounds of fruit by hand. And it was the first year we ever used a piece of machinery. I don't mind saying this, it saved our marriage.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you so much. I'm just very intrigued with like how people handle fruit, because I come from grain where it's like destroy everything, whereas fruit is like treat it with respect and some delicacy, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much.
We definitely do inspect every piece of fruit, though. We have to, because it is the base of everything we do. And so, so here we've just poured the apple. This is one of the 2 out of the 6 fruits that we get from here in Missouri. All of our other fruits, with the exception of grape, come off the West Coast. These are Missouri apples out of Lexington, Missouri. They're lovely. They come from a place called Raisa Orchards. We've been working with this family for over 4 years. And it is a blend of Fuji and Granny Smith apples. And so you get that sweet and this beautiful tart apple, and it just absolutely shows up in this blend.
And they go, actually, we blend them into the mash tank. So they're they mash and ferment together as the right mix. So it's about 3/4 Fuji apple and 1/4 Granny Smith.
Okay.
You referred to a recipe from the Graubünden area of Switzerland. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because this is one of our 2 infusions of fruit brandies.
Yeah, we actually do an infusion. It's a cold infusion after distilling, after the when we dilute it down to drinking strength after the spirit run, we do a cold infusion with a dried plum. So we take a few dried plums and introduce them into the spirit and let it soak in there for like a week. You know, typically it's around a week. And, you know, you got to put the right ratio in there just so it adds a hint of a plum note to the spirit. And it actually adds a little bit of a color to it as well. But, you know, the main reason really is, you know, the plum note that we want to add to the apple. But it's just a whisper of an infusion just to kind of round the spirit. And that's been done in that area in Switzerland, up in the hills, really, for hundreds of years. That's how they do their spirit and how they do their apples. They might use different apples, you know, from up there. We picked, you know, this blend. We did this blend now the 3rd year in a row, and with this happy combination.
You could smell like there was a combination on the nose of the apples, but like the adding of the infusion of the plum is awesome. The flavor is great. Sorry, like when you were talking, I had to mute myself. I was about ready to say some stuff. I seriously, because it was the amount of flavor that you're getting between the combination of that and just the plum underlying, like it comes up like the first like third or half of it, and then it kind of disappears, and you get just it fades away more. There's just a ton of flavor going on here. I'm way too wound up. I'll let one of those 2 pop. Sorry. I need a second to process this. I gotta slow down for a second. You should have warned me about this, Mike.
So I just want to throw out, my girlfriend's texting me while we're doing this, being like, I want to try that. So like I've been trying to be like, yes, we will, without being rude and like getting on my phone. So forgive me for that.
You're not in the same house tonight? Oh, all right. Well,
unfortunately not.
That's she's got something to look forward to then.
Oh yeah.
So what's interesting, the notes I kept trying to remember a lot of notes that I do like things come back like sensory foods or memories and stuff, and I've kind of embraced it, and that's why we start, you know, calling them fat boy tasting notes, because sometimes you're like, remember that candy that you used to get, you know, when you were a kid or something. But what the apple note on the nose, it reminds me of when my grandmother would make her apple crisp, and she would slice up all the apples, and then they would be sitting in a pot of water for a while, and you could smell the aroma coming off of all those apples. And then right when she would start to make the apple crisp, there was this overwhelming apple smell. And then of course that went away to the brown sugar and everything else that was in there. But that's what that aroma reminds me of.
Just a bit cleaner than the actual pie itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think what you're doing right now is what we love to see. A lot of, you know, I joke when, and I think I actually said this to Mike when he first stepped up. I didn't know Mike when he stepped up to taste our spirits. As a matter of fact, he came into one of the places that I was doing a tasting, and he was on his way out the door, and then he turned around. And I'm always on the lookout for whiskey drinkers, because they tend to step up and they want to knock these spirits back. And if you want to see me jump over my table, I will try to stop people from knocking my spirits back. I just can't stand it. And so when he turned around and he started back towards me, I was like, oh no, you're not going to knock these back. You know, I thought I had another whiskey drinker in front of me. But we get a lot of bourbon. We get a lot of bourbon drinkers that particularly like this apple brandy. And I think it is reminiscent of kind of like a light bourbon. It's got a lot of characteristics that bourbon drinkers like. And we find that a lot of bartenders use this in place of a bourbon in cocktails. So you can have a lot of fun with this spirit. It has certainly been a good one for us. We love making this, and actually, it's Martin's favorite this year.
Yeah.
It's really
So
good.
I have a question about so the proof of all these is 41%. Is there a reason for that proof point?
Well, yes and no. Typically in Switzerland, these spirits would be served. Pretty much all the fruit brandies are around 43%, 86 proof. And that's kind of the standard over there. And that's kind of how I started out over here as well. But then we had a lot of people that were kind of like, it's interesting when you do a clear spirit, people think this is much stronger than anything else I've ever had.
Yeah.
Even though the whiskey they had or the bourbon they had was a 90 proof, but they think in a clear spirit, it's just too much alcohol. So we kind of tone it down a little bit, to 41. That's kind of where we're trying to hit it, to have it close there. And it actually helps to bring the flavors and aromas, a little more out of the fruit. And, so we're kind of okay with that, but at home, I would probably do a 43%.
Okay. And Nathan, a question: what type or kind of apples lend themselves to this kind of spirit?
It's a good question. We went through probably 6-7 varieties of apples and tried them really all that we could get our hands on to just kind of see what works and what works better. And the Fuji apple and the Granny Smith was kind of our favorite out of all these trial runs we did. And there's definitely a blend. I think if you just go with one apple, it's kind of, there's a little bit something missing. You can actually add some flavor profiles and aromas, by, pairing it with another apple that is quite different than, the main apple you put in there. And the Granny Smith does that. It brings a little acidity into it, and it brings a little, a bite into it, but just very little, it depends how much. So with the 3/4, 1/4 works very well on this particular, blend.
We did find we've done the first one we ever did was with a Mutsu and an Empire apple, and we really enjoyed that. That was not a blend. That actually was a blend, wasn't it? The first time. That was a very nice combination. Golden Delicious did not show up, and Cameo was too mild, so we wouldn't recommend that. But we've done Johnagolds, and so but Mutsu and Empire were a very interesting blend.
Okay, being 2 of these in so far, I think if you were trying, just in general, if you're trying to bring, like we always say, when you're trying to bring people into whiskey or into spirits or the little bit higher proof, if you had anyone that was into wine, because there are other American brandies that, like you said, the aging of the barrel affects that and affects the taste. Yeah. This is like, I would never drink wine if you had this next to it. It's significantly cleaner. I don't know. I wouldn't even do that. This would be an excellent doorway to bring people into the spirits world in general, because you don't get any of, you're talking about the 41 to 43. You get none of the actual alcohol flavor. Now, maybe you're right. Maybe I've burnt my tongue out with, 65% alcohol at some point, but really, you don't get any of that in the background. But it's where it's clean. So I don't know. It's something that if you were trying to bring people over into a realm of a little bit higher proof, I don't know. I have issues now. I have a lot of issues with. I think this has become my wife's new favorite thing. I'm going to have to keep her out of the bottle too. So
I have to go to Missouri.
Mike,
I know where some can be had. It's very close to me.
These are meant to be sipped and savored, and honestly, if we were pouring, we're pouring light pours here. These nosing glasses we import from Italy. If I were pouring in your home tonight, I'd be pouring to the widest part of the bowl, which would be about a 1 ounce pour, and we would we would sip on that for probably 15, 20 minutes. I mean, they are meant to be enjoyed just as much at the nose as they are on the palate. And I encourage people that have never enjoyed a spirit that way to make that first sip a small one and let it go across the mid palate. And we get a lot of people who've never tried to savor any handcrafted spirit. And I encourage them to close their eyes and just literally block out everything that's going on and just really rely on their palate. Even if they've said, I have the worst nose or I have the worst palate, I can't taste anything, you know, you can put bacon on my tongue. I'm just like, hey, just trust yourself. But the first step that I take of anything, I pay attention to what's going down my palate, just straight down the middle. And then the second one, I start to pay attention to what's happening on the edges. And that's when I start to explore the edges of the spirit. That's the way I think about it. And these continue to open up with every sip you take, because as they get warmer, and that's what that little bowl is for. It's like a little mini snifter. And as these open up, they will get warmer by the touch. And then you begin to explore even more and more of what the spirit can give. So we're going to move on.
Just one more thing to the apple, you know, that was, the apples were in the mash tank for 300 days.
Oh, yeah, this is our longest.
That's
Really?
our longest soaking, you know, and it's 300 days.
That's impressive.
The one you just tasted.
I'm amazed you can wait that long. I would have a hard time with that.
Yeah, that is a long time to be patient.
So this apple is actually the 2019 harvest.
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
So Renita had a question, which about what is the sugar content of the apples, or does it make a difference? And I remember this might have been another distiller's talk, because there was somebody talking about apples. Because me being, you know, like Mitch, someone who enjoys a sweet thing or two, I would think, oh man, a Honeycrisp would be fantastic. But I think that's exactly the opposite. That a Honeycrisp, the higher sugar content of the apple, isn't that go against getting having a good mash from that?
Well, it just makes a very mild spirit, you know, in terms of flavor and aroma, you know, and the mashes that, you know, I did for, you know, the blend that I did for this one, I think if I remember right, that there was probably somewhere around the 12 bricks, you know, so it's fairly good sugar content. You know, the apples are, you know, these Fuji apples are fairly sweet. I mean, they're one of the sweetest apples, you know, you have. They're very juicy, but the Granny's, you know, that's why you blend them. You know, that's where the Granny Smith comes in and kind of puts it all in perspective, you know, to actually get a nice blend.
Okay.
All right.
So we're going to move on to the grape.
That's not good.
Okay.
So this is the Vinaars de Vin. This is one of 5 different grapes that we do, each with a single grape from Missouri. And it is also the second infusion that we do. The one you have in your hands is a Vidal Blanc. We also make this with a Norton, one with a Vignoles, one with a Chardonnay, and one with a Rayon d'Or. Okay. So each one, though, has an infusion with the same botanical, dill. And so I'll let Martin tell you about why that is. But this is our version of a grappa. And we say it's our version because it's really a cross between, kind of somewhere between a grappa and a wine brandy. And so we want to start out by talking about what a grappa is, maybe people that don't know what it is. I know you guys know what a grappa is, but
I mean, the grappa is usually made out of the trester of the wine. So when they press the wine after it's fermented, they press the wine, the grapes, and for the wine, the leftover, you know, gets into the still. You know, it's stems, its skins, and probably about 10-15% hydration left. And then they add water to it and distill that, you know, twice. And that is basically how they make the grappa. Very green note, you know, can be harsh. It can be very good, but, you know, it can be very harsh as well. A lot of them are very harsh. We make it a little different. We take the entire grape and we press it with the stems, and we ferment that, and we put that, into the mash barrel for about 5 weeks. We don't go any longer on those because the stems, that the green note would kind of come through too much and kind of add a bitter note to it. So we only do a 5-week fermentation, and then all that with the stems goes into the still, and we don't add any water. So we use all the grape juice that we fermented with it, and we distill that twice, and that just makes a smoother grappa, or something between a grappa and the wine brandy. And then we do a cold infusion with a botanical. That's typically, what's made over in Italy and Switzerland. There are a lot of grape brandies. There is a botanical added, and we love dill. We got fresh dill, and dill, you don't want to make a pickle juice, so you got to be very careful how much dill you add. So we add just 1 or 2 3 little sprigs into fairly big volume of spirit, and we just soak it in there for like 2-3 days. So very little, and it just adds just a hint of it. And if we don't tell people what it is, they have a rough time to figure out what it is, and that's how we want it. That's how we want it.
I would completely agree, because I smelled this and I was like, what is going on here? Because right, grape brandy's the only grape and apple, like aged brandy, are the only brandies I've had, and I was like, this just something's a little different there when I first smelled, and it's the dill. And when you said that, it was like, of course that's what it is. But
But it quietly, when you were mentioning a grappa, like you said, it's so light, it quietly kind of files in with that little bit of like the stems itself that's in there, and it just like faintly comes across on the nose. But man, is it intriguing, because it lingers on more in my nose afterwards. Just like that little titch of dill than it did in the front end of it.
Yeah, it's on the nose for me. It's like it smells like almost like a white grape, which that obviously makes sense, but it reminded me of an ice wine. Just that density and sweetness on the nose to it. But on the palate, I mean, it was just this really nice, very, very nice grape flavor, and then there's a little tiny hint of dill at the end.
Yeah.
But not in any way that really jumped out. It was just like, what? Well, there it is, right there, and it was just very slight. It's very nice. I like that. That's a very nice accent on the end.
Thank you.
I get in the middle, but man, these are all very refined and nuanced, cohesive. So I would try to find people, but I mean, it's a simple flow between flavors, but what is there is so it makes a statement as it flows between the little bits and pieces of it, or they overlap each other. But it would take a while to pull them apart, because they are so married together. It's a fun ride on each one of these. You were mentioning just drinking it, and I hadn't even taken a sip yet because I was nosing it the whole time.
It's wild. Like, I love
this. Well, so far anyway, this one I could really see this is the end of the night. Just sit with this, and
it's really interesting how all these different grapes taste totally different.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to ask. Is this your favorite one, or do you guys have a different grape with this dill? I'm going to call it technique. It's neat. It's still on the sides where you're getting the grape flavor. It's just that little bit on the side of the tongue, like to remind you of it.
You can add, a whole other, aroma into it when you do a Norton.
Yeah, we could do a whole program on the five different grappas.
Let's do it.
Good.
The only grape that is not a white grape, is the Norton. The Norton is the Missouri grape, and it's a very how should I describe it? I mean, if you ever had a Norton wine, you either liked it or you didn't. It's very earthy. It's very earthy and
Funky.
Funky and peaty and if you make a spirit with it, it actually makes a beautiful spirit. So I like the Norton spirit better than the Norton wine, but it's just especially together with the dill. I mean,
it begins to act like a Scotch. Quite honestly, we have Scotch drinkers that just love the Norton grape, and we get a lot of people thinking that we somehow smoked the spirit because it begins to get peaty and smoky. And bartenders like to play with this like they would with an aquavit, or they'll use these in like a bee's knees or French 75.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, much like you would a gin. You can you can do a lot of things with these, and they love lining them up. We've done what I call a vertical tasting with the 5 grappas with wine people who say they know their grapes, and we're like, okay, let's do a blind tasting, see if you can figure out which grape is in which bottle. It's a lot of fun.
And interestingly, we actually did a blend. 1 year we did a blend because we got smaller volumes from 2 or 3 different vineyards, and we said, well, let's just do a blend. And I'm actually never going to do that again.
Not a good idea.
The grapes get lost in a blend.
Yeah.
And you don't really. It's what we just tasted here, or what we would taste with a Norton. You lose that, and it's just kind of.
They're nondescript.
Nondescript. Yeah.
Okay. Just kind of washes each other out.
Yeah. So.
And that answers another question, because I'm sure there had to be some, stumbles or weird things that happen when you pour them that don't work out. But I mean, for this to be what does come out of it is really neat. And I love that you're doing, 5 different variations. Because like you said, if you're doing a vertical tasting of that would be a hell of a fun night.
It is.
Oh, man. So the nose on this is just so wild to me, because growing up in North Carolina, what is it? Dogwood trees, I think. Right. They flower, and they're just flowers all over it.
Yeah.
And they're edible. So my mom would put flowers on her salads, and she would have me go out and pick the flowers. And being a kid, I'd break a little bit of the stem off with the flowers, and of course they're the new shoot growths with it, and that is what this dill infusion smells like to me. It's wild to bring me back nearly 30 years to a random tree in North Carolina. But
I never knew that about dogwood trees, and of course they're all over Virginia as well. I never knew you could eat the flowers. Well,
at least I'm pretty sure. It could have been a different tree. I thought it was dogwood, but I was 7. So
yeah.
Don't poison yourself on account of me, please.
Should we move? Any other questions?
I've got a question. Have you named your stills?
Yes. We named the first one after your mom, Elsie. And that still produced the first 126 bottles of apple, actually, that we ever made. And we sold out in 4 days. I'd love to say that the whole world was waiting for those 126 bottles, but they were not. It was not. It was friends and family. And those 126 bottles paid for the second still. And a good friend of ours bought enough for her office, and we named it Stephanie. That was the 12-gallon. The 18-gallon was named Tess, after our daughter, and the 4th one was named Anita. And I don't remember. And have we named the 5th one?
No, we haven't named the 40-gallon still yet.
40-gallon.
That's still to come.
Yeah, we just got that online about 2 months ago. we were able to purchase that still in part by a grant from Spirit Hub during the pandemic, which we are forever grateful for. We heard about it and just on a freak whim applied for it and somehow got it. And so that grant allowed us to purchase this cooking kettle. That's really what it is. It was modified to be a still. And so
they're all homemade stills, so that's kind of the cool thing.
Yeah.
They're all homemade. So even the 40-gallon still.
Yeah, they're all named after good women. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's good.
I was gonna ask if the third still was like the most temperamental or gave you the most problems or something like that. Your daughter, right?
Well, if she did, we're not going to say it on live TV because she is also in charge of our social media and, and our tech.
It's the best still. It's
Yeah.
the workhorse of the distillery, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, yeah, we can move on to the next one. I already did. And
You already- So we're going to
Okay.
walk on the wild side, our newest. So the flagship products are our fruit brandies, and we have three more. Our stone fruits are apricot, cherry, and plum, and we can save those for another time. But we introduced our beer bronze in the last 2 years, and this is a collaboration between Urban Chestnut Brewing Company in St. Louis. And we had worked for 5 years to find a brewer that understood good beer bronze. And we found it with Florian Kaplan, who's the owner and master brewer. He's German. And traditionally, beer bronze have not such a good reputation. And we did not want to be associated with the not so good reputation. So it took us this long to find a brewer that understood what we wanted to do. Do you want to give the history of beer bronze?
Well, typically the beer brands kind of come out of Germany mainly, and when there was a expired batch or a bad batch that didn't sell, the brewer calls in the distiller and said, "Hey, do something with it," and they would distill it and make a spirit out of it. These spirits started with a flat beer or something that got mixed together, a blend of beers, and just never really was a decent spirit. And it's kind of like with the fruit brandies. If you start with a bad mash, you're not going to make a great spirit out of it. And we wanted to change that. So with Florian, and Urban Chestnut, they make beautiful, beautiful beers. An IPA, that's what we're tasting here, the 719. It's a India Pale Ale, double Pale Ale actually. And we distill that twice. We just take he actually brews a batch for us, and within the next few days we distill it. And we do with the 719 here, the IPA spirit, we do a cold infusion of a citra hop at the very end. So you might pick up a little bit of a citrusy note, and that's coming from that citra hop. Again, it's just a whisper of an infusion at the very end of the dilution phase to the drinking strength.
And so what's really cool about this is if you start with a really distinctive beer and you do a very careful, slow run. We run these stills slower than we do our fruit brandies, which is just painstakingly slow. You end up with removing all the bitterness off of the beer. And now you get all the characteristics of the beer and none of the bitterness.
And it makes a very smooth spirit because you start with a really refined product
To begin with. And when you distill it that slow, and you have to distill it slow, because if you go a tad bit too fast, all the hops and the green stuff comes over, and you don't want that, obviously.
I am so glad you said that about that, because I was about to ask, how does this taste sweet and savory? And there's not that bitter green note. It is a light and delicate, slightly citrus, herbaceous, heavily floral drink. And I was like, when I drink IPAs or double IPAs, I get none of that. I get pain and bitterness. And this is not that at all. Oh my gosh. So good. Sorry.
Mm.
So I don't drink much beer, and even when I did, I wasn't a big IPA person. I liked it, but the problem with that I have with IPAs are similar to some of the people with peat, is that they look at the number, how many IBUs is it, and then they go after it. And I've done a lot of events. Believe it or not, I actually did used to bike a lot, but it's obviously been many years ago. But a lot of events when there'd be a lot of bicyclists, and the bicyclists, especially coming off of a run, if we had bartending there, the first thing they do is come over, look at the beer, and the first thing that they order is an IPA. And it's so much that when people will go up, you just say, which IPA do you want? Because they're all after that IPA and they're all after that rush and everything on it. And this takes away everything I don't like about IPA. You can tell it's there. You can tell the hops are there. You can tell everything is there, but it takes away that, like you said, the bitterness, but yeah, there's still a little bit of the funk. There's still a little bit of the hops. It's all still there, but it's not obscene and aggressive. It takes the bad parts and leaves the flavor, I guess maybe is.
For me, what it did, like with the other ones, this is one of the few things that I've had that came from a beer and still tasted like a beer, but it tastes cleaner than what it is. It more enjoyable, which is dangerous for me. But I mean, like you guys said, Mitch and I we're on the same page with that. We're not typically IPA drinkers or fans in general, and I have a compare. I don't even want to compare the one IPA that was distilled into a beer that we reviewed on the show compared to this one, because it is maybe one of the best, absolute best version versus the absolute worst. One of the worst things we ever tried. It was bad. Or it had soured over 6 months. Something happened to it. It was not okay. But it's just like this. All of your stuff is this crisp, clean, but full of flavor experience. Like it's neat just to, like, you can tell that you don't take any of the tails in this. Like and it is, and I did a little swirl, very oily for like 41. Like the legs on this, by the time it drops down the side of the glass, but I mean, like, it takes a while. It is.
I did that with the pear, and that line stayed up there for minutes.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh.
I didn't think it moved. I thought I was the only one. I was like, I don't know if I want to mention it.
Well, and like with the pear, that sticks with you after you drink the pear a little bit. It sticks with you for a long time.
Wow.
So I've noticed it's a very weird common theme through all of these. Everything tastes fresh cut, which is weird. Like, it doesn't taste fresh. It tastes freshly cut. Like, there's just that little note in there where it's slightly like green wood, like that dogwood tree I was talking about, where it's just that little fresh sprout that you snap off and smell. In this, it's the hops that are coming through. It's that like deeply vegetal yet somehow really sweet because it's still fresh, like note, and it's there in the grape, it's there in the pear. It's very, like, oh my god, like, to me it's wild. Y'all have almost in my mind a signature through all of your spirits. Oh my gosh, this is so good.
We really are looking forward to working with bartenders for these, to see where these fall with cocktails. Mike, I would be really interested in knowing what how you use these, if you're going to play with these with cocktails, because we don't have bartending. And but would you like to move to the Thrales, the Russian Imperial Stout?
I'm excited about that too.
I've had this one. Well, I had it at 2 tastings, and I own a bottle. So,
so you like it, huh?
I like it because, and it's so I don't make a lot of cocktails. I was always very basic with old fashioned and Manhattans because I like them a lot. And then we we were shown the light with good gin, and that there actually is good gin, instead of things that smell like a perfume counter or a tree air freshener on your rearview mirror. But that's what when I tried the one, I thought I just want to try that as kind of a substitute for gin and tonic, just to see, because it was very refreshing spirit. I would like to do that with this also, playing with the ratios on it, because it's very refreshing. It's very it's vibrant, and like Mitch said, there's just that sweetness that comes through on there, and it's just I could see where if you did do something where you added like you said, seltzer or something, just to kind of to bubble it up, I could see where that would really liven things up even more. But no, this is I do like that. And again, I'm not an IPA person. If IPA beer tasted like this, I would probably drink it. But this is it's nice. It just has all that flavor. There's just so much flavor to it.
Well, we've certainly had a lot of people who've come up to the table to taste, and they're like, "No, I don't drink beer," or "I hate IPAs," and Martin has to convince them to try it. I like beer, but I don't drink much of it because it is so filling. But I enjoy sipping on it.
Exactly.
So this is the Russian Imperial Stout. This is the Vinars de Gervosa 625. And the Russian Imperial Stout we love this spirit because it is, first of all, we didn't do any type of infusion on this. This beer stands on its own. So think chocolate, think coffee, and a lot of roasted malt. And it comes across not only on the nose and on the palate, but this has a mouthfeel. The creaminess that you would expect in this stout comes across in the spirit itself.
Man, it's when you're in there, it's just like having a stout beer underneath.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's just rich. Like you said, the maltiness was like one of the first things I hit. I was like, wow, that is insanely rich. The smell you're getting at 40% is insanely rich for this.
I had to mute myself when I smelled this because I kept saying "what" for like a really long time.
The Russian Imperial Stout is probably the most difficult of distilling that I do. It's very difficult to start it out. If you go a tad bit too fast, and we're going so slow to begin with, but going a tad bit too fast, all this black malt comes right through. I mean, and once it comes through, it's hard to stop. So you got to baby distill, in the first half hour. I mean, you just got to be right on it, and just baby it to get it into the run. And then once it's running, you still got to be careful, but you can let it run, but it's probably the most difficult to distill, to keep all the malt in the still on the first run. That's what I try to do. So the second run is really going to be a clean run. And it's just the distillery smells like heaven when I do the Trails beer, I mean, it is just like, you just don't want to go out of it, when you distill that. It's just beautiful.
So I was going to ask, since this is such like a darkly roasted malt and things like that, do you worry? You said you run it really slow. Is there a chance of scalding the malt even more since it's so burnt, or not burnt, but so well toasted? Or
yeah, we use a water bath, so I distill everything with the water bath. So we don't have any issues, with that.
If you kind of look at the stills behind us, you'll see that they're sitting in a stainless steel, and there's a spacer between. You can't see that, but the copper pot stills are sitting on a spacer, and the whole pot still is sitting in a stainless steel pot.
We're going to seal it up on top, so to keep the heat in.
Okay. So smart. It's just sorry. This is wild.
Mm-hmm. The amount of I've never had anyone distill a beer and have this much of the actual flavor come back through, and wow, like the chocolate, the little bit of maltiness in here is insane. It's insane. It's rich. I can see how, like you were talking about wanting to use this in a cocktail somehow. I mean, the robustness kind of reminds me of like almost using it in a White Russian or something. Like it has this neat, like really rich flavor to it that I don't know. I'm tempted. Mike's bringing a bottle. We're gonna figure this out at Distill America.
I mean, we had it with an Amaro, 50-50, with an Amaro. That was really good.
And espresso martinis, this can absolutely go in an espresso martini and hold its own. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can play with this. Right now we're out of it at the distillery. They have it out at Mike's. I know that in Kansas City. We'll have it again in the distillery in July.
I don't even know if I'd mix it with anything. Like I really don't. Like I mean, even ice is a bit. I don't want to kill that.
I did add some water to it just because I wanted to see what it did to when you took the proof down, and it really does bring much more of a malted milk dud note out of it, just that malty chocolate.
Yeah.
And to clarify, when Lynn says that she knows that they have it at Mike's, there's a liquor chain called Mike's in Kansas City. So yes, Mike does have a bottle up here, but Mike's down the street from me, and at 2 other locations in Kansas City carry it in the brand.
Sorry about that. Yes, Mike's Wine and
That's
Oh yeah, Mike's Wine.
I mean, you can make things happen.
Yeah,
to work.
Meals happen.
Man. And I'll be honest, like I said, not even a beer fan in general, and this is like so incredibly enjoyable.
We actually do a series of 3. We got a Belgian wheat beer that we distill as well, and that actually has an infusion with orange peel, anise, and coriander.
Okay.
Anise infused at the end. That is interesting.
Wow.
Sorry, I love Belgian beers. Like love Belgian beers. That like kind of funky yeast note you get that kind of turns into banana or whatever. Hate bananas. Love that banana note. Don't know why. So that sounds absolutely amazing.
We put these under the Spirit of the Brewmaster series, and it has been an absolute joy to work with the Urban Chestnut Brewing Company team. They're very serious about their beer, but they are a fun team to work with, and their beers just show up really well. They're just a great group to work with.
You can tell they do a good job at the quality of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Just by, like you said, what comes to you, and kudos to you for taking the time to find someone who does that. Because like I said, we have had some other beer related distillates, and it's a gamble at best.
Yes. And honestly, well, I mean, the worst of them have been the IPA, because when it's not done well, it is not done well at all. And there was one in particular that it completely wrecked you, wrecked your palate, wrecked everything for hours.
Yeah, it wasn't a little. There was no fixing it on the show. James tried anything he had in his refrigerator.
He tried killing it with horseradish with hot sauce. He could not get the flavor out of his mouth. Yeah, it was, but it was extremely strong on the IPA note. Yeah.
And it was on the verge of being the really bad old lady perfume. Like it like I said, like it had kind of turned a bit, but yeah, like it was coating.
Well, we got a little bit of an advantage, with our stills, these copper pot stills. They're just the best suited stills for fruit brandies. And if you run the beer through it, it kind of does the same thing. It really collects the flavors and aromas like no other still could, and if you run a small still that slow, I mean, that's just really what makes the difference.
Mm. So in working with you, because how long is the relationship with you and Urban Chestnut?
About 2.5 years now.
Okay. Have you influenced them on things that they're going to try to do because they want to see it distilled?
Well, we're working on a new project with them. Something under, yeah. So within the next, certainly within the next 6 months, we will be able to let you know if something's coming up.
All right. No, that I think that's great because that
I do. I mean,
that's really great for them to do that.
and the back and forth between that's just excellent.
Well, you need, it's interesting. We're so small that it is challenging to work with us. I don't mind saying that because it is, we count our bottles, everybody else is, it comes off of a still in a 55 gallon, it's like a fire hose into a 55 gallon drum. That is, if you look back here, that condenser that's behind us, I mean, it literally, distillate comes off of that still a drip at a time over anywhere from 8 to 14 hours. And most of our customers are restaurants and bars. And so our biggest thing is we need to make sure that we have enough for our restaurants and bars because they put us on the menu. We want to be sure that we can always deliver. When we're dealing with somebody like Urban Chestnut, I mean, that's a big company and we just always want to be sure that we are a good partner to be working with. But our size is challenging and we know that. So when a big company like that does work with us, we know that they're going out of their way and we don't take that for granted. So we just work really hard to make sure we're a good fit. And a lot of that just comes down to, do we value the same thing? And do we value innovation? Do we value quality of spirits? Because at the end of the day, when these bottles sit on the back bar or when they're sitting on the shelf somewhere, somebody else's bottles are not. And
right.
And it's a big deal when 6 or 9 of our bottles are sitting there. So the bottles might look pretty, but at the end of the day, it has to be what's in that bottle and does it hold its own. And we're really proud that they do.
Oh, and with your collaboration with them, I think with them tasting what you guys produce with what they do, I think it has to say a lot. I mean, that when a lot of times you can give people stuff and maybe they had that with other people and you don't always see the quality come out of what you're doing or what you give to someone. But I think it's clearly evident from these that would be a reason to stick with you and do other projects because what's coming out is really high quality. And I'm going to have to fight my friend for a couple of these. So Mike, there's going to be a list. You might as well get a box together.
We can make that happen.
Well,
things can happen. So I have a question. When you talked about the run, how slow you run the stills with the brandy, and then also with the beer, how do you? I guess are you just obviously you schedule, but with scheduling around that, knowing it's like this is going to take forever. Does that, knowing that you're going to work on these products, does that really push when you're going to distill your brandies, or do you typically stick to a certain time of year for doing the brandy?
No, I mean, I don't want to rush, the fermentation. So I'm going to pretty much stick to those durations. And with all the different fruit, they really kind of come, it's seasonal. So things are kind of spread out, and then in the down times, if there is any downtime, that's where I do the beer. I can schedule the beer between those fruit runs and kind of fill in with that, or that's where we, work on a new project. But
well, it might help to talk about when the fruit comes in.
Well, when the fruit comes in, it's all hands on deck,
I'm gonna say you're both cutting stuff up right away.
If the cherries come in, if the apricots come in, I mean, they don't last for a long time. I mean, you basically got to jump on it and do it, So
yeah, we don't use frozen fruit, we don't use, so when it comes in, so apricots are due in early June, cherries followed by cherries in July. We'll get plums in late July, early August, maybe late August. Then we start getting grapes, followed by apples, and then pears are usually our last ones in November, December. January, we're starting and we're distilling during that time. Cherries and grapes start up within a month after they've been in fermentation. And then by January, we're distilling a lot, but we're not doing any processes and we have fruit. So we're typically getting beer in at that time. And then bottling.
But it's got to be bottled. It's got, the dilution takes a lot of time, to diluting it down to, when it comes off the second run, it's typically around 150, 160 proof. And I got to dilute it back down to the drinking strength, 81, 82, 82. And, I do that within 4 steps. I do that very slow. I do that the same way I distill. It's drip at the time, and
over what?
Doing it very carefully. So you don't do any aeration and anything like that. So, I diluted the plums. No, actually, the trails today while I was distilling, and then I kind of combine obviously what I do down there, but. Every time we dilute, we let it rest for 3 days before we do the next round of diluting. And so it takes a long period of time, until everything is processed through and ready for bottling.
That's wild. Sorry. I started to do math in my head, and I was like, all right, so they've got an 18-gallon still. It takes them 10 hours to run it. They don't collect tails. They're running like 1.1 gallons of beer that would be whiskey. So you're running 1.1 gallons of your mash or whatever an hour. It's just like, oh.
Yeah, but that's what makes the difference. That really is.
It makes a huge difference. But sorry, so I came from Heaven Hill, and anything under 300 was a failure. So there's a small difference there, right? And it just breaks my brain a little bit,
Yeah.
Like that's passion there to run it at like a gallon a minute is.
Yeah, but we get asked a lot, don't you want to ramp it up and whatever, but I'm very careful with changing what we're doing, because if you take any shortcuts, it will show up in something missing, in the spirit at the end. So, the way we do it, we're going after the highest quality we can get on these fruit brandies, and the best, the most enjoyable, experience when you taste it, and we're not going to give up on that. So we're going to stick to it.
Well, you guys sounded busy as heck there. I know you guys are getting a chance to finally take a vacation.
Yes.
On your vacation, are there what excites you about going back spirit-wise? I understand, just in general, I know there could be a million other reasons why I would be excited to head back, but spirit-wise, is there anything heading back that like gets you excited to try, or that like you might remember that sparks the excitement from going back?
Well, it is 99% family that we're going back to, because we haven't been back to Switzerland, which is where Martin's from, in almost 4 years. And we've got a grandchild we haven't seen since she was a baby, and she's almost 4. So we're super excited about that. But we are going to be going to Tuscany for the first time. So we're going to be enjoying some really good wines and obviously some grappas. We're going to be going to Switzerland. The Swiss aren't quite as open with we'll probably see some eau de vies over there, taste some eau de vies, but getting behind the scenes in a distillery in Switzerland is not as easy as you'd think it would be. They're not quite as open. However, we're going to the Isle of Skye, and we will be, we'll be hitting some distilleries over there. I think the thing I'm most excited about is that we are going to meet Capriola's Distillery, which is we have been long wanting to meet Barney, and he agreed to a meeting. So we're going to pack some spirits, and we're going to meet with him and just talk spirits with our English counterpart. Yeah. So we're super excited about that.
That is fantastic.
That sounds like
great.
Okay, usually at the towards the end of the show, we'll do a blend of whatever we've been having tonight. Have you two kept up with that this evening?
I have not, but I've got just a touch that I'll do that because I'm really curious what's going to happen.
Well, that's why I'm making you do it. I'm a little upset. Like I had it, and it is like this crazy explosion ride of all sort of the blend of all of these is pretty nuts, and it's pretty good. Do you guys ever do that do you ever play with 2, 3, 4 of these different things and make your own kind of blend for an evening?
Well, there is actually, a spirit.
Actually.
There is a spirit over there, that, an Obstler, which means, a fruit brandy, really a fruit brandy. And typically it's apple, pear, and plum that you mix with, together, So if you mix those 3 together, and I would be probably heavy on the apple, maybe 60% of the apple, and then 20 and 20, with the pear and plum. That actually makes a pretty decent, blend.
Mike, have you got? He's still working.
I'm going
Mitch,
to do
have you
2
done the
blends.
blend?
I'm doing the overall, and then I'm just going to do a brandy blend.
Okay, all the science, and I'm behind it, but I'm impressed by how much of like the fruit and the plum comes through on this, and it's just I did light on both of the beers. I want just to be honest, but just enough of that maltiness kind of like sneaks in on the backside of this. The whole thing is neat, and I'm surprised that this is as good as it is too. Just I don't know, it's a fun one. Mitch, what did you think of the big blend?
Hold on. Okay. So blended brandies so much better than brandies blended with beer. My beer was my all 5 was a little heavy on the distilled IPA, so it gave me that with like some interesting warm fruit notes at the end, which was good. But I really liked the IPA, the 719 for just how clean and crisp it was. So it kind of you lost that to get warm fruit notes, which it's a toss up. Oh, the blended brandies though. Oh.
All right, then.
So this is good. I don't know if I like it necessarily more than any of the ones distinctly, but it is interesting.
I do like the blend of the brandies, and man, is it oily, which I love.
It's but clean oil. It doesn't. It's not it's heavy. It's not like it sticks like heavy cling over time. It just feels light, but it lingers nicely.
The blend of brandies is very interesting because it almost killed the top notes, if that makes sense. Kind of the light estery, bright notes, and now it's much more earthy and herbaceous, or at least the one I did. Right. So kind of that dill type and that kind of dogwood shoot note I was talking about earlier is really coming through.
That is neat. It's fun all the way around. Everything you guys have had has been beautiful. I don't normally glow as much as that, but I might get into a discussion about an overall tasting when you go to a distillery, or we've had people on the show where we've had 3 or 5 samples from somebody, and there's only been a couple times where the entire tasting has been like, damn, this is one of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is
that blend of all 5 of these.
Yeah,
that's really good.
I went too heavy on the IPA.
Yes, you did, but the stout. It was just like a little, probably like 5-10 on each of the beer ones. But
and you know
just
what,
enough to add the right.
The thing that's surprising at it is the accent of the IPA distillate. That's what it comes through, where he's got this little burst of citrus on there, little funky citrus on it. It's very, very interesting. Sometimes we've done this and it's like, that was not a good idea. And then, But this was no, that was really I liked the blend of brandies because it just the I mean, it was like having a lot of different fruits, and you were getting all the different flavors, like having a handful of fruit. Oh, I'm getting a little of this now, and it was really nice. The blend of everything was very complementary to each other. Nothing was fighting. I'm actually going to do that, and then let it sit for a few days and see what happens. Because I swirled it around as much as you can to try to get things to marry up, but that's very, very interesting.
We'll have to try that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I said, the optional, is actually that idea, it's and typically, like I said, it's apple, pear, and plum, and if you get the right mix, they really, work very well together.
Yeah.
Here in America, we have split brandies, which went out of style a long time ago, but they were a brandy and a whiskey effectively distilled together. Basically, they didn't have enough enzymes to get all of the alcohol out of the grain, so they would supplement it with fruits for the sugar content, and it worked. Like, it was very popular for a long time. And Prohibition came along and changed / destroyed a lot of great things, but we effectively made a split brandy with distilled beer and brandy. So it's not outrageous. It's just
it's outrageously good, Mitch. This is neat.
Yeah. Well, and for anyone anyone who hasn't caught on so far, we like these, but people shy away from unaged spirit, because you shouldn't call it new make. Because there is a difference. It's an unaged whiskey, but there's that there's things you expect when you think of an unaged whiskey, with flavors and things, and this is absolutely none of that, whatsoever. There's nothing where you would say, oh yeah, that's got that new make thing to it. It's not, because it's not new make whiskey. This is an unaged distilled spirit, which is completely different. And I mean, have you thought about aging any of it just to see what it does, just in general?
Well,
yes, we have.
We have, but it's a little bit of a volume issue,
right?
And the three fruits, that we kind of talked about a little bit, is apple, grape, or I would love to do a plum, a VA prune, basically. That's just beautiful, if you get the right, barrel and the right time, and that just makes an absolutely beautiful spirit. And I think that would almost be my first one that I would want to try, but it's
the amount of fruit we'd have to have to do a 50 gallon, and we don't want to do a smaller barrel because of the ratios.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of small barrels, especially for fruit brandies. You got to give it the time, and you can only do that, in a big barrel, and we just don't have the volume for it, So
right.
So
well,
small
it doesn't sound like
get tannins out of it a little bit more when you're going quick and shorter with it. And
yeah.
Well, it doesn't sound like you have a problem getting rid of what you do make now. So,
But I want to thank you guys for coming on. I didn't realize we'd had you on here for an hour and a half. But it's because you have 5 fantastic spirits we tried, and then the blend was great too. Thank you for sharing some time you guys did with us this evening. If you do have other stuff, Mike might look into it, but I mean, the vertical tasting you were talking about, or something later this year, if you'd ever like to come back on again, we would love to have you on. And when it comes to this year's Brandy Bash, we might have to include you guys if you're okay with that, because holy cow, there are some things that people need to try here. My state's, we suck down like 2/3 of the brandy in the country. So just need to get a couple bottles up here. I think you guys will do pretty good, because it is a really neat.
You should clarify that, though. Wisconsin
that's
sucks down 2/3 of the cheap brandy.
Of the cheap,
United
shitty
States.
brandy. Yes, that was it. But we do drink other brandy. Well, we drink probably 2/3
Yeah.
of whatever it is anyway. So our state is known for that. But it's how clean it is just absolutely phenomenal with the flavors
Yes.
you're getting. That's like I said when I was comparing it to a wine, it's like seamless because you do not get that level of alcohol in here at all. And it's all just like big fruit punch. That's neat.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the opportunity here and to show our spirits to the world, and that's what we're all about.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Mikey. Thank you so much for stopping by and tasting. And Patrick, we appreciate the invitation. And Mitch, we know you with Heaven Hill. We know you have been on much bigger projects. So thanks for taking time. Very, very small.
This is the good stuff. Come on now.
But thank y'all very much. It was a pleasure to meet all of y'all and spend this time with you and your audience tonight.
No, thank you. And we appreciate it. Oh, sorry, Mike.
I was going to say, it's obviously anyone that you guys do tours and visitors.
Yeah.
So anyone who's going around the area, please stop by and visit. But hopefully, maybe someday in the next 1 to 52 weeks, you'll be online so where you can buy your spirits online.
Yeah. We're a matter of fact, I'm going to Jefferson City tomorrow. Yeah. The Missouri ATC just recently changed its mind about being able to ship our spirits inside the state. But
great.
if you are interested, we don't have a public tasting room here, but we do private tours. So if you go to our website, which is edelbrandpuredistilling.com, it'll give you a way to contact us. We do ask that you call us. We do self-distribute across the state, and don't just show up because we may not be here. If you schedule us ahead of time, we will always try to accommodate anybody that wants to come by and see the distillery. And we're happy to show it to you. And and we appreciate your interest in our spirits. We love making them. We love sharing it with people and educating people on unaged brandies and beer bronze.
Well,
super good.
Fantastic. So, next week, we are having Alan on the show, and we're going to be discussing some ancient distilling practices. So we're going to be spinning back the clock and seeing what some people did a long time ago when you almost didn't think people were doing stuff.
Yeah.
And
it's going to get weird.
It's going to get weird.
It's going to be really.
But that's a good thing. So, like we said, thank you guys for coming on. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone in the chat, for being here this evening. And if you can get your hands on it, if you can't, let me know, and we'll do our best to make everything happen because it was an absolutely fantastic tasting. So, remember, it's not the size of the den that matters. It's the love of brandy. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Good night.
Good night.